For years, Rabbi Yosef had dedicated his life to studying the Torah, leading his congregation, and teaching the ways of righteousness. He believed he understood what lay beyond this life, until the day he died. What he encountered in the afterlife shattered everything he thought he knew. He returned with a message so urgent, so terrifying, that he could not remain silent. What did he see? What truth was revealed to him? Stay until the end, and you may never see life the same way again. Rabbi Yosef never imagined he would die the way he did. One moment, he was giving a lesson in the synagogue, the next, his chest tightened, his breath shortened, and the world around him faded into darkness. As he drifted from his body, he felt an eerie stillness, as if time itself had frozen. He saw the room from above, watching as people rushed to his side, calling his name, shaking him, pleading for him to wake up. But it was too late. Then, in an instant, he was pulled away, drawn into a vast, endless space. There was no ground beneath him, no sky above, just a tunnel stretching forward, illuminated by a light so pure it was almost blinding. A force beyond his understanding guided him forward, and though fear gripped his soul, he knew he had no choice but to follow. Rabbi Yosef found himself standing before what seemed to be a great throne, but he couldn't make out the face of the one seated there. A presence so powerful, so overwhelming, surrounded him that he could barely stand. Then, a voice, not spoken, but felt, resounded through his being. It was the voice of God. As his life played before him, every action, every word, every hidden thought was exposed. He saw his moments of kindness, his acts of faith, but also the pride he had carried, the times he judged others harshly, and the moments he believed his knowledge alone was enough. Tears streamed down his face. He thought he had lived righteously, but in that moment, he realized how blind he had been. Rabbi Yosef expected to be taken to a paradise of peace, but instead, he was shown something that shook him to his core. He saw countless souls, crying out in agony, not because they were simply suffering, but because they had rejected the truth when it had been offered to them. These were not just sinners and criminals. Many were people who had lived good lives. But they had placed their trust in rituals, traditions, or their own wisdom rather than truly seeking God with their hearts. Then, he saw something even more shocking. People he had once judged as unworthy were standing in radiant light, full of peace. He realized then that it was never about knowledge alone, but about knowing the true heart of God. A figure approached, radiating a light unlike anything he had ever seen. Rabbi Yosef immediately recognized him. It was Jesus. He had spent his whole life avoiding this name, rejecting him, denying that he could be the Messiah. Yet, here he was, standing before him with eyes full of love and sorrow. Jesus spoke, and his words pierced Yosef's soul. "You searched for the truth, yet you would not recognize me." At that moment, Yosef understood. The Messiah he had been waiting for had already come. The one he had dismissed was the very one standing before him now. He fell to his knees, weeping, not out of fear but out of overwhelming revelation. He had been wrong. Jesus then showed him what was coming to the world, a time of great deception, where many would believe they were following God while turning away from his true path. He saw chaos, division, and spiritual blindness. But he also saw hope. Those who sought God with a humble heart would find the truth. Those who were willing to look beyond traditions and truly seek the voice of the Lord would not be led astray. Yosef wanted to stay, to learn more, to be in this presence forever. But Jesus told him, "You must return." They need to hear this. The next thing he knew, Yosef gasped for air. Nurses surrounded him, their eyes wide with disbelief. "You were gone for several minutes," one of them whispered. "We thought we lost you." But Yosef knew he hadn't been lost. He had been found. The doctors called it a miracle. The hospital staff marveled at his survival. But Yosef didn't care about any of that. He needed to share what he had seen. He tried to explain, but some dismissed him. Others listened, their hearts stirred. He realized that just as Jesus had shown him, some would believe, and others would turn away. When Rabbi Yosef returned, he couldn't keep silent. The experience was too real, too overwhelming to ignore. He gathered his family, his congregation, and those who had followed his teachings for years. Standing before them, he took a deep breath and spoke. "I saw the truth. And it was not what I expected." He told them about the judgment, about the souls crying out in regret, about the shocking revelation that had changed everything he believed. He spoke about the one who had greeted him in the afterlife, the very one he had spent his life rejecting. Some gasped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Jesus? The idea alone was unthinkable. Yet, Yosef pressed on. "I was wrong. I thought I knew everything about God, but my pride blinded me. Jesus is the Messiah, and He is the only way." His words sent ripples through the crowd. Some sat in stunned silence. Others whispered to each other, unwilling to accept what they were hearing. But there were also those who felt something stir deep within them. The backlash was immediate. Yosef had spent his entire life in the Jewish faith, teaching the Torah, guiding others in their spiritual walk. But now, he was being shunned. Old friends refused to speak to him. Some called him a traitor. Others accused him of falling into deception. Some even said he had lost his mind. The rejection cut deep, but he refused to be silent. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. Nothing would shake his conviction. He traveled from synagogue to synagogue, sharing his experience. Some doors were slammed in his face. Others allowed him to speak but dismissed his words. But then something unexpected happened. People started listening. Those who had once questioned their faith began to seek answers. Some started reading the New Testament, something they had never considered before. And those who truly searched with an open heart began to realize what Yosef was saying was true. But with the growing interest also came increased opposition. Yosef wasn't just ignored, he was actively attacked. The more he spoke, the more enemies he made. Yosef received threats. People he had once called family turned against him. He was warned to stop, or suffer the consequences. But Yosef wasn't afraid. He had seen the afterlife. He had met Jesus. He knew the cost of speaking the truth, but he also knew the cost of staying silent. Too many souls were at stake. Despite the threats, he kept sharing his testimony. He spoke in secret meetings, in small gatherings, in places where those who hungered for the truth could listen. And with every testimony, more and more people began to question what they had been told. But Yosef also knew that not everyone would listen. He had seen the afterlife. He had seen what happened to those who ignored the warnings. And he knew that time was running out. One night, Yosef prayed, asking God what he should do next. As he closed his eyes, he was suddenly overwhelmed by another vision. He saw a great separation, those who followed the truth, and those who rejected it. The gap between them was growing, and darkness was creeping in. Then, he saw a massive door closing. Behind it were those who had refused to listen, those who had hardened their hearts. They pounded on the door, crying out, begging to be let in. But it was too late. The realization struck him like lightning. The time of decision was now. Once the door closed, there would be no second chances. He woke up trembling, knowing that he needed to warn as many people as possible. From that moment on, Yosef spoke with even greater urgency. He told people, do not wait. Do not assume you have time. The door will close. He urged them to seek God, not through traditions alone, not through knowledge alone, but through a personal relationship with Jesus. Some still mocked him. Others dismissed him. But many listened. He began baptizing those who wanted to follow the truth. People who had once rejected Jesus now called upon his name. The movement grew, and Yosef knew that God was working. But with the growing numbers, the opposition intensified. Yosef knew that his life was at risk, but he didn't care. He had seen what waited on the other side. He knew that eternity was real. Before his experience, Yosef had believed that following the laws and traditions was enough. But now he knew the truth. Jesus had shown him that many would stand before God, thinking they had lived righteously, only to hear the most terrifying words. "I never knew you." Yosef begged people to open their hearts before it was too late. He pleaded with them to seek the truth now. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. He ended every testimony with the same words. "The door is closing. Which side will you be on?" Rabbi Yosef's story is a wake-up call. He was given a second chance, but not everyone will get one. The afterlife is real. Judgment is real. And Jesus is the truth. The question is, will you seek him while there's still time? If this testimony moved you, like this video and subscribe for more powerful near-death experiences. You never know who might need to hear this message before it's too late.